Hey, what's up? It's Michael. Yo, welcome to Comics on Canes. Today we don't have a comic, but we do have a guy that I know knows recruiting because every all the Miami Hurricane fans I talk to, they always bring up this guy they called Rasta, and I was like, well, I got to get him on the show because I like to show love to everybody. Because the Cane fans, you have showed love to me. Hit that subscribe button, Rasta. How are you feeling?
Excited, anxious, um, just ready to get it here. Obviously week one is going to be a big one. A team we don't get to play often, unfortunately, because they're scared of us. So
Exactly.
it's fun though, man. I've been in this for a while, and I've been a fan for a while. So anytime you get to beat up on Florida, I'm all for it.
I was talking to my fellow friends, Kane fans, we were talking on Comics on Kane. I've never been, because see, unlike a lot of Canes fans, I missed all the championships except 2001.
Right.
So I missed them all. I became a Canes fan when I moved to Miami in the
Uh-huh.
early 2000s. So I was there 2001 and on. So I've seen nothing but disappointment pretty much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when people question my caneness, I was like, yo, I've rolled with them for 23 years during the bad. I've never seen the good.
Yeah.
I've seen a little bit, but I've never seen the good. But I can tell you this over the last 18 years, going into the first game, no matter who it was, or going into the season, it's like you really honestly feel, if you really take off the orange and green glasses, you're like, you could lose any game.
Right.
I felt that over the last 18 years. I've never felt like, yo, we're about to dominate. We're about to roll. I've never felt it.
Right.
This year, for some reason, and my friend made a comment, Forrest, on the podcast. He goes, even the way they're standing in the pictures, it's just a snapshot, but there's something about them this
Right.
year. And I feel it too. I've never felt so confident going into Florida. I've never felt so confident about the season. It's just something they got in the air that they haven't had before. Do you agree with that?
No, absolutely. I'm from Florida, so confidence, cockiness, just it walks. I'm never going to go into a season and think that we can't dominate somebody. I love the sport. I've played it my whole life.
Yeah.
You don't have that in you, and I think that's something I was missing too, right? Like, when we talk about the previous 18 years, because I'm kind of with you. I'm a '90s baby, so I grew up the
Yeah.
latter half. And the worst part is I grew up in Gainesville, which is
Oh,
Gator territory.
oh,
Um, so I got a full brunt of it. Luckily, I moved off, went to the military. I left that town. So
yeah. Good for
uh,
you.
yeah, but yeah, I think that's something that was missing, right? Like when we hear about the old days, we've seen some of the clips, the swagger, the confidence, going into every not even just the games, going into every practice, going into every meeting, going into every day, going into the not just the season, but you're talking about all season, spring, summer, fall. There was just a roar around the university back then.
Yeah.
You hear some of these greats like even The Rock, who obviously didn't go on to have a great career in the NFL, but listen to his stories when he got to Miami. Oh man, I felt like I had to be there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I still wasn't even the first guy. Like those
Yep.
things are what made us great, right? And I think that's something that's been missing. And I think a guy like Cam Ward needed to bring that. Your leader, the guy that's the front and center. I think that's where we lack with even Tyler Van Dyke. You go back to Brad Kaya, who was great. Brad Kaya was elite. But there was no confidence and swagger from that position that we've had in quite some time, right? And a lot of people are going to say, well, you had Ken Dorsey, who was kind of quiet and nonchalant. But when you go back, look at the team around
Yeah.
him. That team around him was confident. He didn't have to. So, and I think that's what we've been missing. When you get a guy like Cam Ward and you hear about his every practice, he's talking smack to the defense.
I love
You
it.
know, yeah, like it is kind of when you hear the coaches talk, you hear, man, we're out there having fun. We're out there playing like we're enjoying ourselves. That's what we haven't heard in a while. And not the I don't care about the little fun of man, we're just out here nonchalant. No, they're out there taking care of business, but having fun doing it, right? That's the biggest thing I think has been missing.
Can I tell you the thing I didn't see in Mario year one or year two? There's this confidence he has in interviews
Hmm.
where, yeah, there's still work to be done, but he's proud of the team he's putting out this year. You could just tell in interviews.
Right.
You know, like the first 2 years is like, hey, we need to build up this, we need to build up that. Now he's like, he's very comfortable putting
True.
his team out there. And you can feel it in his interviews. You can see it in his interviews. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Not like when you listen to a lot of those guys that were under Jimmy, under Butch, those guys tell you how they were as a person, right? Jimmy wanted to kill every opponent. He wanted to pure dominate. Butch wanted to make the opponent not want to come to Miami at all, more or less schedule us for homecomings and stuff like that, right? You hear those, and then you look at other coaches that we've had, and we're like, man, that's what's been missing, right? Like,
Yes.
and a lot of people, I couldn't tell you Mario's the guy, right? I believe Mario's the guy, but I can't tell you that because we don't know, right? We don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen in the future. But when a team takes on the mentality and the mindset of your coach, that's when you know where your program's headed. And Mario himself, man, he's very disciplined, he's very structured, but he understands the culture. Like we had Manny Diaz, right, who was always from Miami, is born here, he understands Miami. No, he don't. He understands maybe the city,
Yeah.
but not the University of Miami in the community. And I think that's where Mario is going to get the tide turning. He really does truly understand it.
Can I tell you, every time I watch Manny Diaz coach, I felt like he was coaching more to save his job rather than to win games. And that's why so many players were undisciplined. They kind of did what they wanted to do because he was like, I got to have this player play on Saturday or I'm going to lose my job.
Right, right.
You know?
Yeah, he's kind of already a step behind.
Yeah.
Trying to take instead of just taking regular steps to get ahead, he was trying to leap and bound into it, and end
Yeah.
up picking up.
We lost Ben Hanks to Florida. So we lost that one. But how does he fall in the category? Was he a big priority for Miami?
Absolutely. I mean, he's probably the best DB down here in South Florida this class. Absolutely. If not one of, because I like Chris Ewald up in
Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale too, Hollywood. But yeah, he was a major prospect. Mario wanted him badly. And you can kind of put him in that same category with Vernell Brown, right? Like they're two legacies from Florida. Fathers were big there. That Vernell Brown's whole entire family are, all legacies at the end of the day. But to overcome those things, right, it takes more than just recruiting, right? Like it takes NIL for sure. I hear everybody, but
Yep.
it also takes the resume for your DB coach, right? And then people are gonna say, well, Will Harris is new at Florida too. I understand, but they have the legacy thing, right? They have the father on board, they have the family on board. So Miami is literally having to bring everything to the table. And when you got Travis Jackson, first year, he's coming from Marshall. Yeah, he's a young, energetic coach, and I love him. I think he's amazing. He's doing wonders for that DB room, right? But he has to overcome that. And then you also look, Miami's got 6 DBs already committed, right? That's another huge thing. Whereas Florida's got like a couple, and that's not a knock on them. They may not be taking class. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I know with us, we're taking a big class. We want like 7, maybe 8 guys, depending on who wants in, And then you also got to take in the fact the SEC, the brand itself, it just sells. And then your father played there. That's a huge, ordeal.
And and Spurrier showed up.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
Ben, I mean, come on, man. They unretired the jersey and all. I get it. I
right.
totally understand that. It's like, how could you not say yes in that moment? But I also believe this: Canes win 10 or 11 games. A lot of these people they missed on, they'll be back. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I mean, my thing is with the legacies, Vernell Brown, because we're still recruiting them. Ben Hanks, we're still recruiting them.
Yep.
But I think a lot is going to have to happen there. If Florida goes and somehow wins 7, 8 games, because that schedule is brutal. If they are able to show great signs, right? More, I don't think you flip those guys.
Yeah.
But maybe 4-8, kind of like what they're projected, like that 4.5 total. Things happen. Billy may get fired. Mario does have 10, 11 ACC championship. Like there's a lot of things Miami can really flip. Yeah, there is a potential. I still say a small chance just because literally everything has to unwind at UF for us to flip those guys.
Now, how many? Because I'm hearing that even if Mario gets the last couple of guys he wants, like his last two recruiting classes are going to be ranked higher than this year's. There's no way he can get to the 3, 4, 5 slots this year.
Yeah, yeah, that's tough. I mean, if you go and look at some of those top five teams, the Georgias, the Texas, they're always going to be there automatically.
Yeah.
And you still have Texas A&M who's going to compete. Ohio State who's doing wonderful things there. Auburn who is probably taking that step. If they could beat Alabama this year, maybe they jump. If not, maybe Bama comes back up in there. I mean, there's a lot of different teams, right? That when you get into that five window, you're talking upper echelon, right? And I've said this before. When you go back and look at Mario's recruiting class at Oregon, he didn't have top five classes. Mario had top 10, top
Yep.
12, and he just developed. Mario, the one thing I think a lot of the fans have to kind of simmer back a little bit, you got to trust him, right? Like, go look at his evals. You got Bobby Pruitt, who's a 3-star, already showing great signs. Cole McConaughey, 3-star, doing great things. You hear Ruben Bain talk about him. OJ Frederick, who everybody was like not even
Everybody.
about. Now he might start. You know,
What start? He was a 3-star, right?
he was a 3-star out of St. Thomas Aquinas. So, there's a lot of different things when you're looking into evaluations that go in effect, right? Inez Cooper, probably our best O lineman. I mean, he's a 3-star. So I get it a lot. Like I want the 5 stars too. Don't get me wrong. I love recruiting. I love the being top five and all that. But it a lot more does come down to it. And Mario's process in general in recruiting is more than just looking at rankings and go, right? There's a whole eval like list that Mario goes through steps when he's looking at guys. So I like where we're at in recruiting. I like the guys that we have. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. But I do think Mario is gonna bank on this season. If he can get 11, maybe I'm just throwing it out there 12-0.
Yeah.
Mario, it's not gonna be like Florida State where they're struggling to recruit. Mario's gonna go crazy when it comes to recruiting.
How crazy is that? What is it about Florida? You go 13-0, get blown out by Georgia in the bowl game. But what is it about Florida State where they're not getting the good recruits?
When you
You would think 13-0, you're getting everybody.
right,
Why?
nah,
What is the disconnect, you think?
I mean, when I talk to young men, and I mean, it's reported out there, a lot of concerns are development. Like Florida State likes to go, oh well, Miami, they depend on the portal too. If you go look like Ruben Bain, freshman All American, Francis Malanoa, freshman All American, Inez Cooper. Like, there's a lot of development there. Like, yes,
Yeah.
Miami does use the portal, but everybody does, right? Like, that's not something that's mind blowing. But when you look at what Miami's resume is to that, and then when you go look at match Florida State's up, there is a disconnect. And even if you go look at Florida, right? Like Florida and Florida State, Florida's got a little more development, right?
Yeah.
I get it. You can argue P's and Q's and apples and oranges. You can do whatever you want. But unfortunately, when a kid sits down and he talks to this coach or that coach, there's going to be some negative recruiting going on, right?
Yeah.
Everybody does it. When you say, hey, look at my guys that I've recruited for these 3 years here. Now let's go look at his that he's been there 5 years. He still don't have a quarterback, right? He's still struggling with wide receivers. There's a lot of things the coaches can use against him, and I think that's a big thing. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they do this year because they're bringing in a whole new roster, really. So if they don't repeat the kind of where they were last year, yeah, it's going to
They
be.
could fall apart. I remember Mario was getting a hard time about coaching, like either his first or second year. You remember it was his first year. You remember TCU had this breakout year with all those transfers, and then nobody brought that up last year
Right.
though, because they fell off the face of the earth. And
That,
Florida might be on that same path, but I think the main thing about Mario, yeah, he took the knee, whatever, it happens, but he knows how to build rosters. He knows how to recruit. Everything else you can work on, I believe. You know what I mean? The main thing is getting the dudes in the door,
yeah,
and
that.
that's what he does. I want to move to out of all the players we got. Who's your favorite one? Who's your favorite recruit coming in?
I'm a safety. I played DB my whole life, so Drake Stubbs is automatic. I think he's the best safety in the country. When you look at his tape, he reminds me of Brandon Merriweather. Like he's a hard hitting thumper that can play center field, right? And that's what we haven't had in a while. Like Everybody wants to talk about Cam Kitchens. I love Cam. Cam was phenomenal, right? All American. It doesn't really get much better, but we're talking size, speed, pure athleticism, and a bruiser, right? Like think of Cam on a different level, right?
Yeah.
Like just everything you want in a DB. That's what I mean, when you look at our roster, that's what we're missing, right? Everybody's question is safety. It's not corner, it's safety. Who's going to be the guy next to Mish Powell? So getting a guy like him in a huge position of need, and we all know DB is like the priority of Mario's class this cycle.
Yep.
And we're doing well. I think we have one of, if not the best, DB class.
Now, I said this in an earlier podcast, but I honestly believe this. Like, people think our secondary is not going to be up to par because they're young, they're this. I think that actually the secondary is going to be better this year than last year because how many times did we see just free receivers running down the field? Look, how many busts were there? And the NFL told you didn't have two safeties. You had a safety and a linebacker trying to play safety. Let's be honest. Let's just call it what it is, right?
Yeah,
So when people are doubting the secondary, it's almost like, oh, Cam did his thing. He's doing his thing for the Rams. But when you see James Williams play linebacker and how he's showing out, you go, man, can you imagine him and Kiko? I mean, come on, man. That's
absolutely.
ridiculous. And I don't think you would have saw all the bust. There was
Yeah,
a lot of bust, but it was first year, growing pains through the system. But I honestly feel all these guys second year, a lot of them second year
hmm
under the system. So
yep.
I can't see as many. I mean, how frustrating was you would just see a receiver, even over Cam, that one
Yeah,
where we lost. I can't remember what game. Oh, Georgia
Georgia.
Tech,
Yeah,
just running free. That happens so much. And you know what's so frustrating as a Canes fan? It happens to us so much, but it never happens for us, right?
yeah. At least the last 18 years. I
At
mean,
least the last 18 years. So
yeah,
my thing is, I think the secondary will be better than last year because I think they didn't even rank that well in certain categories. Like they were horrible in certain categories. So I think they will be better. What's your take on the secondary this year? Do you think last year's secondary will be better than this year's secondary, even though we lost two safeties to the NFL?
no, absolutely. I've spoken on this before in one of my discords that when you look at our team in a whole, right? You can go break down every position. It's talent, it's deep, and it's athletic, right? That's what we've been lacking. Even when Mark Rick got here, right? That was one of his
Yep.
first things he said. Man, we're small. Like this is the O line, right? Like this is my wide receivers. I don't have playmakers. That's the thing we've been lacking, right? And when Mario got here, he brought a few little things every season, but we're finally deep, right? Like you have a fifth year senior in Daryl Porter. You
Yep.
have Amari Brown, who balled out, right? Went off. Then you bring in a guy like Donnie Hill from Marshall, great experience. He understands the system. He's played in. He understands Coach Chevis Jackson. Then you also have Jadaeus Richards going into his second year in the system. But then you get a guy like OJ Frederick who comes in not only this year, but he came in the summer. Like he's only a couple months in the system. Put on 15 pounds already, great size, and he looks athletic. He's very underrated. He's got the size. He just had to learn the technique. He was learning the position. Then you got Ryan Mack, who's going to back him up. Like we're finally deep. Like you can actually rotate some guys. That's where I think, like you were speaking, are we better than last year? Yes, because we're talented, we're deeper, and we're more athletic. So,
Yes.
and then you were talking about James, and I agree with you, right? Like when you go back and look at last year, and it's like sometimes you just shake your head. James will make plays. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
He had his moments. He come downhill and take your head off. He also had the plays where he give up a run, 50 yards, 60 yards up the sideline because he couldn't catch them.
Yeah.
Cam trying to make a play, which is not his fault. Down here in Miami, we love the big play, right? So he will bite, chump, and then guy behind him. So when you look at what you're bringing in, Mish Powell coming from a national championship team, right? He started there. He was a walk on that ended up being a starter. That just shows you his work ethic, what he means to a team. And he's bringing that to a young group of Jaden Harris, who's been in the system now 2 years, three, he's been in college. But then Markeith Williams, a
Yeah.
guy
He's
that
showing out right now.
he is balling every practice. He's had an interception. That's crazy. So And I think that's going to be the interesting part, right? Markeith or Jaden, who's going to start? I'm excited, man.
Yeah, man, I think, and I said it before. I think the secondary is going to shock people because how much time are quarterbacks going to have with that
Yeah,
defensive line we got? I mean,
absolutely.
you got 2 seconds is not going to be enough. like there's some beast on that
Yeah.
line, and you know what I love? It's three deep now. It's three deep on the ends. They can go all day. Like
Oh,
Ruben Bain, you remember at the end of last season, Ruben Bain was so tired.
mm-hmm.
Like he was playing,
Everybody's
they
hurt.
were putting him everywhere. He was just tired. Now you
Yeah,
got help, bro. You got Akeem back. You got Barrow. Like, it's just, it's unbelievable in 3 years what
absolutely.
Mario has built. Look, they got to show it on the field, but I've never been more confident. Now, let me ask you on the misses, what's the biggest miss so far to you?
Um, I mean, you can kind of pinpoint. I would say there's two, right? It's kind of sitting at the top. You have DJ Pickett, just because DB is such a huge priority. He's a
Yeah.
legacy. He's a 5 star. Something the Canes haven't landed a 5 star DB since Tracy Howard, right? So it's been too long, and that's a huge miss. But then you also have Yossi Epinesa, who just committed to Iowa, who's another legacy. So it's getting back into that Ben Hanks scenario where it's like, dang man, you're battling these legacies, but he's a 5 star defensive end who is incredible. His brother plays in the NFL with Greg Rousseau, right? As Canes fans, we should be excited. He's been on campus with Greg before,
Yeah.
walking around, and I mean, it was a lot to be excited, right? And I think both of those kind of sit up at the top because they're both 5 stars. One's at position need, and one's like just an epic player.
But uh I believe Yosei is the one that if we have a great season, for some reason, I feel since it took him so long to get to Iowa and he was going back, it wasn't a definite choice. It's kind of like to me, Ben Hanks, to take that long to go to where your father played, and it's the legacy. If you're not in it right away, there's a lot of doubt, and I really feel they're both like, okay, let's see what Miami does. And Miami brings 10 wins, 11 wins, man, I feel like you're going to lose a lot of these 3 stars you picked up because they're going to be switching them out for 5 stars. And that's the game now because they're all getting played. It sucks, but that's the game we're playing now.
No, absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah, man. Uh, Jamie French, where do you think we are with him?
I think we're right behind Texas. August 30th, he commits. And I just think Texas has such a great hold on it right now. Miami's giving him everything to think about. Obviously Drake Stubbs just plays alongside him. But I just think it's kind of like what you were just saying, right? Like they want to see what Miami does. They can flip any point in time down the hold, but let me get in my spot somewhere else. That way, if Miami does do what Miami typically does, I'm good, right? But I can always flip later on. And plus, if you look at it, you want to play in Texas offense with Sarkeesian or Miami with TBD, right? That's kind of what we're looking at.
Right?
And if say Cam Ward goes off and he does have this Heisman trajectory type season, you got 2 receivers over 1,000 yards. You got another one that's close to it. The tight ends are beating. That to me is what I think will end up. And it's not even just Jamie French. I mean, you got Joshua Moore, Dallas Wilson, Tyler Williams. There's a lot of receivers that have their eye on Miami, and I think a lot of what you as a Canes fan, what you want to watch, who shows up during game days, right? Like what visitors end up coming to Virginia Tech on a Friday night,
Yeah.
Florida State on because we don't know if that's a night game or not yet, but if both teams are doing well, that's going to be a night game. We all
Oh,
know
yeah.
that. So, and I remember 2 years ago, that game was sold out, packed out. Recruits are hundreds of them down the sideline. If Miami's undefeated, that game's going to be very, very similar. So, there's a lot to
Yeah.
look at.
Yeah. I just feel like this season's going to be great. I think we're going to get a lot of these people we lost. Uh, but how much, when you say Cam Ward lighting it up, how much does a recruit go, well, he's not going to be here when I get here? Is there any of that? Because I'm looking at, and not to jump too far ahead, but I'm looking at the quarterbacks we got now. We got good quarterbacks, but you don't have one like Cam Ward even coming in next year. So they're
Yeah,
more of a statuesque type of quarterback. You know, they're
right.
great arms, throw it around the yard, but that's why I'm saying, man, how much does a recruit look into that? Well, Cam's not going to be here next year.
So I mean, if any recruit that's getting recruited by Texas and Georgia and Bama, that's going to be their niche, right? Like, hey, that guy might light up for 4,000, but he won't be playing
Yeah,
here. That obviously is always going to be in the back of a mind of a young man. But you can also look at last year. Jeremiah Smith goes up to Ohio State. That quarterback transfers, and then they get Will Howard in for one
yeah.
season. So and yeah, we could talk. They landed two elite quarterbacks, right, in high school, his class. So I understand that, but those guys aren't coming in next year, right? Like, that's not projected. And I think a lot of times we don't know what our quarterback two is going to be, right? Like, Emery looks good in practice. He's looked way better than, he's growing. But personally, I think you're going back in the portal next year anyways.
I
You're
do
going to go.
too.
You got to, and it's nothing against Emery. He can light it up. But when you look at, you got Emery, Judd, and then Luke coming in. I love Luke. Luke, I think, will be wonderful, but he still needs a year at minimum. And then I just don't. And it's nothing against Judd. I just don't know if he plays here, because if Mario does light up this year, or Dawson or whatever, there's gonna be quarterbacks that are saying, "Hey, I want to go there."
Are you
Um,
convinced? Are you convinced Poff is not that guy? Because he's mobile too.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard is Emery's just beating him out. Like, it's
Yeah,
not even close. And it's not. I say this a lot of times when I talk to fans about kind of the roster management, because they look at it. Why did we take him? Well, what was the purpose of it? We could have. But you know how hard it is to tell a quarterback, hey, come sit for a year and
yeah.
you know, go battle next year, because Mario don't promise starting position. So hey, next year you could try to battle it out. We'll see how it goes.
By the way, I could bring in a portal quarterback too. So
Absolutely.
there could be somebody that's not even here that's going to be here too.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, man. Well, Rasta, where can people find you, man?
Twitter, Rasta edits. There is my page got hacked like 2 or 3 years ago. So if you see a Tua profile, I am a Dolphins fan, but if you see a Tua on there, that's not me. I'm not a Tua fan. So that's the page that got hacked. But Rasta edits on Instagram, Twitter. Sebastian Lane is my show with my co-host Dave. We've been going on 3 years now, so we do live interviews with recruits, bring them on. We chop it up with them, kind of we call it behind the mask, right? Because not only do we talk recruiting with the kid, but we also get to know them personally too.
Uh, you're a Dolphins fan, right?
I'm Miami everything.
Okay. So what do you think about Tua talking about Brian Flores and Mike when he
Man,
said Brian was just what's your take on that? Because some people are like, oh, you're just whining. And then some people are like, no, I mean, he's bringing down his confidence. What's your take?
I mean, when you look at, this is my motto growing up. In general, there's three sides to a story. There's his, hers, and the truth, right? And at the end of the day, I don't. In his defense, I understand. Like, hey, he talked this about me, so I'm gonna get it off my chest. Not mad at that, but it's kind of like, man, just you, bro. You getting paid now. You got a brand new coach that you love. Let's focus
Let it
on this,
go.
and let's go try to win a Super Bowl. I actually, and Dolphins fans will probably kill me, but I hope we don't, because I can't stand Jalen Ramsey. I don't want him to win anything in life. So I believe this more than anything. So, and he's a Florida State dude. So
Yeah.
I at least this year, I've been trying to trade him since we traded for him.
I just don't know if they, like Mario built the trenches. I don't know if Miami's trenches can handle it in the cold, and that fast offense can handle it. We saw them just fall apart in Kansas City last year. I just don't know if they're built for that. They would have to have home field advantage the whole playoffs.
I don't even think that'll matter, to be honest with you, because they're like, some of our O line was getting hurt here in South Florida. This heat is just as bad as those winters sometimes. So
Yeah.
and a lot of our O linemen, man, I mean, they're just. I said it last year going into the draft. I would have blew it all up, traded Tua, traded Tyreek, traded Ramsey, try to get draft picks, rebuild everything. And they were like, oh, you can't, you got a quarterback, and he's a. I listen. I don't. Like you just said, it does start from the trenches. I'm a
Yep.
DB, and I'll tell you, it starts in the middle of that line, and you get rid of Christian Wilkins. So we're scrapping pieces right now in the middle of that interior. The O line is just we haven't had an O line in quite some time.
Yeah.
And Dolphins fans will put on the blinders and tell you, well, McDaniel's is a scheme around it, and it doesn't matter, bro. Like you said, when you get time for that cold, that Kansas
Yeah.
City game, and you got to run between them tackles, you're gonna need some old linemen
Yeah. The cold don't care about your passes.
at, at all. It's hard to catch in the cold.
Right. All right, Rasta, man. Thank you for checking in, man. We'll talk soon. All right.
Absolutely appreciate it, man.